Let's talk about your mom. You shared with me that she was only 12 years old when she married your dad.
Yes, I think that was normalized at that time in the late 1970s and still today. I mean, in Chad, mostly girls get married at a very young age. And at a very young age, she started working as a housemaid, helping household chores, cleaning dishes, and fixing beds, and maybe taking care of kids, even though she was a kid herself. And she is a strong woman.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Yasmine Mohammed podcast. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Our guest today is Mansour. Mansour was born and raised in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, and he immigrated to the US in 2005. Mansour has a degree in Sharia and Islamic studies, and he has firsthand experience with radicalization tactics used to recruit and mobilize Muslims worldwide. His research and writings in Arabic and English have focused on understanding the root causes of violent extremism in the Arab and Muslim lands. Wow, so lots to talk about today. Mansour, welcome.
Thank you.
So let's start off with your story because you've got a very interesting family background. You've got connections in Saudi Arabia, and Chad, and Sudan. And I really want to talk about your childhood, how all that was. But before we start to talk about you, let's talk about your mom, because you shared with me that she was only 12 years old when she married your dad. And I wonder if you ever spoke to her about that, if that was something out of the ordinary in Saudi Arabia at the time, or was that just normalized?
Yes, I think that was normalized, and at that time, in the late 1970s, it wasn't something abnormal, and still today. I mean, in Chad, mostly girls get married at a very young age. My mom went to Saudi Arabia with her grandmother, with her mother, who is my grandmother. She was 6 years old, and she grew up in Mecca. And at a very young age, she started working as a housemaid, helping in household chores, cleaning dishes, and fixing beds, and maybe taking care of kids, even though she was a kid herself. And she is a strong woman. She managed to raise us as a single mom. We had a two-bedroom. We turned one room into a restaurant. So she would cook in the kitchen, and one of of the two bedrooms had become where she would serve the food for
Okay,
people.
that's amazing. Wait, you jumped a lot of years there. So first
You
she was
know,
a kid cleaning houses, and then suddenly she's an entrepreneur owning a restaurant. So what
yeah,
happened in between there? How many kids did she have?
6 kids total. So she got
Wow.
married. And then when my sister Iman was born, she's the fourth one. Um, Before she was born, my dad was arrested and deported to Chad. He was a political activist against the regime in Chad. The regime collaborated with the Saudi authority, and he was arrested and deported. I remember I was maybe 5 or 6, but I remember police forces coming to our house in the middle of the night and arresting my dad and deporting him to Chad. In Chad, he served maybe for 6 or 7 years. Most of his inmates, died during the imprisonment and all that. So my mom, a single mom, I think at that time she was maybe 18 or 19, with no support. We didn't have a lot of relatives. There is my aunt and there is my grandmother, but they're all struggling as well. And creatively, my mom managed to start cooking. This is the only thing she can do. And she turned one of the two bedrooms into a restaurant. And Growing up, I see a lot of men coming to our house and eating while I was, in school. When I come back from school, we all, four of us stay in one room while the other room, um, is turned into a restaurant. And she managed to become a very successful woman. And, she made a lot of money out of that. And she bought some real estate, in Sudan and Chad. And I like the fact that she is a very independent woman. I'm very proud of my mom.
Oh, wow. I think everybody listening to this is very proud of your mom and in awe of your mom. I mean, at 18 years old, we're still children. Like most of us haven't even left the home yet. And she's been married and six children and started a business. Like it's unbelievable. It's incredibly sad and angering that she had to do these things. Like that's unfortunate that she was forced to do this because of course she wants to provide for her children. But it's amazing that she had the internal fortitude, that she had the resilience, that she had the intellect to be able to do all this, right? She because it's not only like she needed a lot of emotional intelligence, as well as entrepreneurial intelligence to be able to figure out how to run a restaurant and to purchase property. I mean, that's amazing. She's amazing.
I think her survival skills kicked in back then. She was
Yeah.
single with four kids and, no income, nobody to rely on. And she really took care of us for a lengthy period of time. She could have gotten married immediately, but she did not do that. She
Yeah.
only got married after I finished middle school. And
Hmm.
then, she had two other kids. But
Hmm.
I can talk about my mom forever because I
Oh,
think
that's
she's
wonderful.
she's she's a very strong and independent woman, and I like that fact. And she had been married at least maybe five or six times, and in all these instances, she would, you know, if a man, if she did not like the man, she would just let them go. And I like
Right.
that fact, and a lot of women
Hmm.
should really do that. And it was something that I feel proud that she could do.
Me too. Good for her. Because a big part of the reason why they keep women down is to keep them unable to fight back. You're not going to be financially independent. You're not going to be able to support your children. You're not going to be able to take care of yourself. So you just take the abuse and you shut up, right? They don't even educate girls for the same reason. You're not going to get an education so that you won't be skilled, so that you can never get a job, so you can never take care of yourself, like what's happening in Afghanistan today. But the fact that your mom already knew that she was strong and capable, she didn't need to put up with any man's abuse. She didn't need it. Like she could maybe want it. It would be a nice, addition to her life. But if it's going to be a negative addition to her life, then just get rid of it.
And that's the importance of being financially independent. And this is why exactly the Islamists do not want women to be financially independent. They always
Hmm.
focus on, oh, the man has Allah give man the right to, pay for the expenses of the household, and women do not have to do anything but stay home and take care of the kids. All these are controlling tools that they use in the name of God to just control women and subjugate them into dependent beings.
So perfectly said. When I was younger, I knew a woman who had converted into Islam, and she'd had a really difficult childhood. And she said that the thing that attracted her to Islam was the fact that a man had to take care of a woman, that she wouldn't have to work anymore because she was tired. And she said, I don't want to do it. So now in Islam, the man has to support me. It's his responsibility to take care of me. I don't have to do anything. And I said, in a prison, You also don't have to work. Somebody is also providing food for you and providing a roof for you and everything, but you are imprisoned. But they don't see that right up front. They don't see that. They just see the like, oh, الرجال قوامون على النساء. They think that's a positive ayah. They don't recognize the control in that statement of men are the guardians of women. Men are responsible for women. That means you will be a dependent for the rest of your life. You will never be independent, right? But that edict is so scary to me, but it's so, you're so absolutely correct. It's a way of controlling women.
And all that would be okay if women are given the chance to choose
Mhm.
independently. I know it's very tricky, especially when you grow up religious and you think this is the right thing and this is the religious way of living your life. It would be really hard to think otherwise. But
Mhm.
if given the opportunity to think critically and then decide whether you want to be a housewife or you want to pursue something, it's totally fine. But I see a lot of imams bragging that, oh, even Western women, when we tell them that you don't have to work if you marry us, you can just stay home.
Yeah.
As you said, some of them would be like, oh my God, that's impressive. But at least they have to choose here.
Exactly. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being a housewife. When I had my kid, I wanted to be able to stay home with her as much as possible. There's nothing, of course, that's a natural human desire for mothers especially. That's not the case. The case is I had my education. I had skills. I was financially able to support myself. So I wasn't beholden to a man. When they marry girls off at the age of 12, and when they tell them that they're never going to get an education the way they told me, or the way the girls in Afghanistan are never getting an education, that is absolutely removing from them any ability to ever stand on their own 2 feet. They want these girls to continue to be dependent on men for the rest of their lives. Making a choice in a relationship with someone that you love is a completely different experience than being forced into this because you're subjugated, because you are a subordinate being. All right, so tell me about your whole life. How you grew up, you're born and raised in Saudi Arabia. Now, this is what I want to ask you because you and I had a little conversation before about a soccer game. Do you remember that when you told me about there was, yeah, the soccer game that you
Oh
wanted to
yeah.
join when you're in Saudi Arabia? Yeah. So I want you to talk about that because a couple of weeks ago, I had a guest on named Ines. And Ines is Egyptian. Her father is from Gaza, her mother's from Egypt, but she grew up in Saudi Arabia. And she said, for 46 years, I lived in Saudi Arabia, and not for 1 minute of those 46 years did I ever feel like I belonged, like I was a part of Saudi Arabia. So, did you feel the same way being born there, your mother being born there? Did you feel like it was your country?
Okay. Well, I can really talk about this forever, but I will try my best to make it very brief. Born in Saudi Arabia, growing up in Saudi Arabia, I thought that was my country, my homeland. Still, I call it my homeland, even though I don't have its citizenship. It is the Arabic dialect that I go to when I want to express my deepest feelings. And, even when I'm most angry, I go to that dialect. Even though I speak Sudanese Arabic, I speak Chadian Arabic, you know. So that's where I go to. And growing up in Saudi Arabia, having my mom grew up in Saudi Arabia, having my grandmother moving there, and my grandmother also died in Saudi Arabia, and she is buried in Saudi Arabia. And having all these factors, it's the only thing that I knew. I went to Saudi schools. It was heartbreaking when I was told that this is not the case and I am a foreigner and I will always be a foreigner in Saudi Arabia. It came really hard on me when I finished middle school and I was not allowed to go to public Saudi high schools because I was not a Saudi citizen. And the incident that you mentioned, we grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, and me and my Saudi friend went to try out at one of the Saudi clubs, and I was rejected at the door because I was not a Saudi citizen. Even imagine going with your friends that you grew up with to a place and they get admitted and you get rejected just based on some documentation that you don't have, even though you share everything. The first national anthem I learned to sing in my life was the Saudi national anthem. And not only that, now my nieces and nephews are in Saudi Arabia. Not imagine their mom born there, their grandmother grew up there. Their great grandmother is buried there. Guess what? They are still foreigners in Saudi Arabia with no chance of, getting a Saudi citizenship. In fact, one of them, my nephew, is getting deported now from the only country that he knows. And the sad thing about this is they just get away with it. Nobody
Mhm.
is calling Saudi Arabia xenophobic. Nobody is saying Saudi Arabia hates foreigners or hates immigrants. They're getting away with it very easily, and in fact, sometimes they even brag about how welcoming they are and how you should be appreciative, how foreigners and expats should be appreciative for getting visas to go to Saudi Arabia and work over there. And even the wages are different. I can go on and on. The wages are different if you're Saudi versus if you are non-Saudi, even though, again, if you're born there. And one of the first thing that I'm proud that I started in Saudi Arabia was petitioning late King Abdullah to grant the sons and daughters of foreign expats the naturalization, or at least giving them some green card, recognizing their, love of the country. A lot of them really love the country very much, and they can do anything to it. Unlike the immigrants, the unappreciative immigrant who come to the West and they're not happy. They don't like the West. They hated it so much, but yet they live in it, versus those who really love Saudi Arabia, want to give everything for Saudi Arabia, including their lives. They don't get a chance, not even not to recognize as citizen, but not even to play in Saudi teams. Now maybe there is a little change in the system in Saudi Arabia, but still, I have brothers in Saudi Arabia, and one of my brother's wife and his kids, they got deported from Saudi Arabia. All of them were born in Saudi Arabia. The mom, the kids, everybody. And it's heartbreaking, growing up, they taught us that there is no difference between an Arab and non-Arab. All Muslims are equals in the eyes of Islam. Yet, in my elementary school, the teacher would come in and ask foreigners to stand up. If your residency card hadn't been renewed yet, you get expelled from the school. You will be sent home until you renew it, and then you come back. And these are some of the things that made me really think and questions everything that I've been taught as a young person. I mean, I can go long and on and on. I in Saudi Arabia, as I said, I went to public schools, and also in the afternoon, I would go to the Quranic school. These are Quran memorization schools, sadly, run by pro-Muslim Brotherhood people or Salafi people who are, very close to the jihadis and all that. And in my mosque, I remember I growing up, one of the first book that I read that was available in the mosque was the stories and the miracles, the mujahideen, the Arab and Muslim mujahideen who fought in Afghanistan at that time. And it's crazy.
Yeah. Wow. Unbelievable. So much information there, Mansour. So many shocking things that I think people will not be aware of. Will be very surprised to hear this. 4 or 5 generations in Saudi Arabia, yet you are still a foreigner and you can still be deported. You don't even get equal rights as far as your salary is different. You don't have access to the same schools or the same soccer games. Like it's just really unbelievable how they treat people there. And then yes, they like to pretend to say all the time, all Muslims are one ummah, all Muslims are the same, right? But of course, we know that that's not the case at all. Um, so I could also talk to you about that for a very long time, but there's so much to unpack there. But I want to talk about you as an individual now. So you're growing up in Saudi Arabia, feeling this disconnect because Saudi Arabia is not embracing you as a fellow Saudi. Um, you start going to school in Chad first. And then later you went to university in Sudan. And your family has connections to both Chad and Sudan. And of course, you're born and raised in Saudi Arabia. So talk to me about your identity as a young Mansour. Like, um, how did what was what how did all of this affect you developing your identity? Because you said something very poignant. And you said you belong to all 4 countries and you have citizenship in all of them except for the country of your birthplace, which is really sad. But talk to us about that whole thing.
Yes. So I was denied education in Saudi Arabia for being a foreigner. And here again, my mom stepped up and said, I should go somewhere to pursue my education. A lot of my friends at that time, they did not continue their education, and they settled with their middle school diplomas and all that. And even
Wow.
though
Okay, hold on a minute. So if they're not allowing non-Saudi citizens to go to their public schools, they are essentially keeping these people down. They are going to be keeping these people in indentured servitude, basically.
to just also be honest here, at that time, private school were not that popular, or they're very expensive for people to send their kids to,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
they're still expensive right now to send your kids to
Yeah.
private
I
school.
mean, your
And
mom went
so,
there cleaning houses, right? So
right.
if that's the situation of people coming from Chad or from Ethiopia or wherever they're coming from to work there, which is very common, as we all know, right? This is very common in Saudi Arabia. They basically have people enslaved in their homes doing everything for them. If so, these are not people with means that can go paying for private schools for their kids to go to, and their kids do not have access to publicly funded schools. This is actually completely new information for me. I didn't know this.
Right. And imagine if you have 3 or 4 kids, and imagine also your salary is really not that much money you can make. So anyway, the situation was very difficult. And once I wasn't allowed to go to school there, my mom suggested that I go to Chad. Since my dad lived there, I have my uncles and my aunties and my extended family, basically. So I went to Chad at the
How
age
old
of
were you? Oh,
14.
okay. Sorry.
So I went to Chad, and I was really upset. I was not happy that
Of
I
course
wasn't
not.
allowed to go to school there. So I tried to embrace a new identity in Chad, because in Chad there are a lot of people um, who were born and grew up in Saudi Arabia were deported to Chad. So there is you can say a community of deportees living in
Mm.
Chad, and they refer to them in the Chadian culture as the sons of Saudi Arabia. And, when I went to Chad, I did not want to be part of the sons of Saudi Arabia because, I don't, Saudi Arabia did not consider me its son. So I decided to mingle and, make friends with the local people. So I avoided the people that I share the culture and the tradition with and the language. And I associated myself to my new identity. I said, well, I'm Chadian, I'm from Chad, I'm going to embrace this culture, I'm going to learn about it. And this is me, this is my identity. And it worked out really well. So, and that's involved, changing the way you dress up, changing the way you walk, changing
The way you
if
talk.
the way you talk, because Chadian Arabic is completely different than Saudi Arabic. And I joined. I was a high school student then, and I focused on my schools and made friends. And I graduated in 4 years. And again, I went back to Saudi Arabia. I went back to Saudi Arabia after getting a scholarship to go to Sudan. So I said, okay, let me just go see my family there first, and then I'll go to Sudan. And I did,
Mm.
I stayed for a few months. And one of the really also sad incident that happened then. So my friend and my brothers were very happy that I came back, right? After 4 years that I did not see them. And they decided it was after Ramadan. So it was Eid time. They decided to take me out so we can just have fun. One of the friends is a Saudi citizen, and the rest of us were foreigners, right? But we grew up in the same neighborhood. So we're in the car. The Saudi police stopped us and, showing IDs. One is Saudi, the rest are not. And I am in just an Umrah visa in Saudi Arabia. And the first question that he asked us, or he told the driver, the Saudi car owner, the owner of the car, he said, "You're Saudi, why are you mingling with these
Wow.
foreigners?" And he said, "Well, these are my friends." And that was really shocking. So I was arrested. I was about to be sent to be deported,
Wait, arrested for what?
just maybe for overstaying my visa.
Ah, okay.
Right. And I was about to send to the deportation house, but this Saudi friend of mine and my brother talked to the policeman and they said, well, it's Eid time and we promised his mom that we will, get him back. And he's not gonna stay. He has plans to go to Sudan, blah, blah, blah. So they explained that it took about 2 hours.
You're born and raised in this country, and you're coming back to visit your mother, and you're almost arrested
I was
for
arrested.
being
I was in the
there. You
back of
were
the
arrested.
I was in the
Oh,
back of a police car while all this negotiation was happening. Anyway, after 2 hours, I got released, and they took me home. After that, I went to Sudan and I did my university in Sudan in one of the universities that is based in Khartoum, very much controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood regime of Sudan.
mhm.
And I can talk a lot about this, but one of the most interesting subjects that I first they taught us at school is called the Waqa al-Alam al-Islami, meaning the situation of the Islamic world. And in that class, everything you hear that all the problems of the Muslim world were created by the white man,
Jews.
by the Europeans, by the US. Every single conflict that, so no
Not the
agency.
Jews. The Yahud weren't involved.
I mean,
Maybe they were
they're
controlling the white men, probably.
exactly. Well, they are part of it. So all the problems, and until recently, and this is just gonna end with this and let you talk. Until recently, so recently there were big flooding in N'Djamena, the capital of Chad, right? Big flooding, a lot of houses get destroyed. It happens every year, by the way. But this time was really more severe. And I was looking at some of the comments, they blamed France for picking
Oh,
N'Djamena to be the capital. And the French left almost 60 years ago. So it just tells you the absurdity of some people. Like you would think that they would blame the government for not building the sewage system in the capital, but no, it was France to blame because France picked this city to be the capital.
we have talked before about this perpetual victimhood mentality and this absolute refusal to take any kind of accountability or responsibility. And I do want to talk more about that, but I want to continue down your timeline right now. So you said there's 4 countries that are a part of you. We've talked about 3, and the fourth one is the US. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
So you told me a story that just like stuck in my heart, and I've actually repeated it so many times on this podcast. So people who listen often have probably heard me refer to this story where I talk about this man Mansour who I know from Saudi Arabia who told me that when he went to Washington, D.C., he went to the Holocaust Memorial and he told me that he walked in the doors one man and he walked out the doors a completely different man. So please tell me about that experience that you had.
Yeah, and this is really very important issue about the relationship between Muslims and Arabs and the Jews. And it has, I mean, I think everything that is happening right now relates to the lack of education about, especially Muslim, about the Jews. And growing up in Saudi Arabia, I have been taught to hate the Jews, even though there was not a single Jew that I know in Saudi Arabia. There used to be, but I don't know of anyone. And also to hate the Christians and basically everybody who's not Muslim, and even some Muslims group like the Sufis, the Shias, as a Salafi, as a group Salafi, as a Salafi Muslim, you should condemn their practices and call them unbelievers. So growing up having all these stories about how Muhammad treated the Jews, how he basically annihilated an entire tribe, the whole tribe. He killed all the
Mhm.
men in the tribe, took women as sex slaves, and took kids to be servants. And Muslims take it as it is. In fact, they say this is the right judgment because Allah approved it, even though it was uttered by one of the companions of the Prophet, but the Prophet approved it because it came directly from Allah. And nobody would argue that, well, if this Jewish tribe broke, let's say, a treaty with Muhammad, it might not be all the men involved in the decision making of this,
Or the women and children.
or the men, women, and children. Maybe you could, uh, charge the head of the tribe, maybe a few men who made the decision, but everyone in the tribe to be killed. Yet Muslims don't feel that there is something wrong here. That was crazy. Anyway, growing up, I did not really think much about this until I came to DC and, I was offered a visit to the Holocaust Museum. I really didn't know. Growing up, you also questions everything. And I know a lot of people still question that the Jews get the Holocaust is real or not real. They question the numbers, they question everything, all the atrocity that they've been through. And one of the things that could really help Muslim understand Jews very well would be learning about the Holocaust, learning about what had happened to them, learning about all all the atrocities that they had been through. And understanding that would really help into putting that into perspective when dealing with Israel, when dealing with Holocaust survivor. In fact, Muslim clerics say, well, Hitler did not finish them. We will finish them in the future. This is what Qaradawi said. And this is what almost every single not extreme, even regular imams would say. This is uh, about the relationship between Muslims and Jews as an eternal enmity that would not end until even stones and trees would talk to Muslim and have them kill every single Jew that is hiding behind them. And it is crazy. Crazy, when I say crazy, is that we here in the West are allowing this kind of teaching to be preached in schools. Imagine me running away from all the Islamist discourse and all this heavy toll of Islamic education that is intolerant, that is pro-violence, that is dehumanizing women, to come back, to move to the West, and you find it here. No, I don't enforce anything on my kids, but if my kids would go to these schools, they would again embrace these radical views and ideas and think that this is the religion. This is their, father religion, or this is their ancestors' religion. And this is scary. And it has to be changed. It has to be changed. Maybe you can ask me this later, but I believe that extremism exists. We don't have, you cannot eradicate it all, but you could at least, or we could in the West, we could make those people who have, or who share these extremist views not to be employed in our mosque and Islamic centers. This is the least we can do, to
Right.
teach the kids tolerance, peace, and love, because they would hire imams who come from the Middle East, from countries where no coexistence happening. They have no clue that a Muslim, a Jew, a Christian can live in the same neighborhood and everybody can be happy. They have no clue that this is actually happening here, yet they come with all the baggages that they have, with all their problems, and expose our kids here to them. And I find this completely absurd.
Yes, it's absurd and it's deplorable everywhere, but it's especially shocking when it happens here in the West. But I think this goes back to your point about this inability to do any kind of self-reflection, because you identified that as really the key. That's the key to all of this, is to, because when we first started this conversation, before we started recording, you were talking to me about going to khutbas or listening to khutbas, which are the Friday sermons for the Friday prayers. After October 7th, nothing changed. They're still speaking in the exact same extremist manner, still pro-violence. Nobody wants to condemn Hamas. There's no growth happening. There's no change happening. There's no self-reflection happening. What happened to you when you went to the Holocaust Memorial and you walked out a different man as you learned? Your mind was opened. You started to see Jewish people as people. They're human beings. They can be victimized just like the rest of us, as opposed to this story that we were sold, this conspiracy theory that we were sold, that they were these all-powerful beings and they were the ones that were controlling all the evil in the world. So it's pretty crazy, to think that that's the kind of rhetoric that is so normalized in our communities, because even when you talk about it here in the West, it sounds like, Nazi propaganda. It sounds like the kinds of stuff that they used to say before the Holocaust. Like that's what amped it up for the Holocaust to happen, was just their complete lies about Jewish people eating babies and, all of this other crazy stuff. But these crazy conspiracy theories still exist in the Muslim world. People still believe these things. And like you said, they've never met a Jewish person in their life. So they have no counter evidence, right? They've got no interactions with Jewish people. Their only interactions are with other people that believe this same crazy narrative. And then when you're in the West and you have the opportunity to grow and to learn and to progress and to get past these things, they choose not to. In fact, they choose to claw themselves and their children back to the fundamentals of Islam, back to those days of eradicating that entire Jewish tribe and taking the women as sex slaves and then pretending, oh no, Safiya, she fell in love with Prophet Muhammad the day after he killed her father and her brothers and her husband. Yeah, she just fell in love with him the next day. So it's like this, the only way that Muslims will grow and change and progress is if they're willing to look at those stories and to feel, instead of feeling pride, they should be feeling shame. And I have not seen that happen on a large scale. I've seen individual people, I've seen myself go through that, I've seen you go through that, but the indoctrination that's happening in mosques and happening in Islamic schools is almost a bulwark in the West. It's almost a bulwark against these kids opening their minds and starting to have interactions with Christian people and Jewish people and atheists and Hindus and whatever, and to see them all as friends, right? They don't want that. For me, I was constantly quoted the ayah from the Quran that says that a true believer will never take Muslims and Christians as their friends, right? I was admonished for having non-believer friends. In fact, I wasn't allowed to have non-believer friends when I was younger, but I defied them and I would get in trouble for it. So yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. And I want to talk to you about the system of radicalization that you're familiar with. So you have a personal experience with this. And I want to ask you if you can talk to us about it, first of all, and then talk to us about if you see similar things happening in the West.
Okay. Well, radicalization, it's a process. Okay. And people react to what they have been taught, to what they think is true. And in my example, growing up, Islam was presented to me as a violent religion, is a religion that celebrates all the wars that the Prophet took place in and his companions. It also celebrated these Sahabas, and none of the Sahabas were celebrated for being pro-peace and peaceful and reconciling. They they've been celebrated as fighters, as they wage jihad, and this is how actually this is the typical introduction of a Sahabi, of a Prophet companion, that he participated with the Prophet in Ghazwat Badr or Ghazwat Uhud, in the Battle of
Like Abu
Badr or
Bakr.
Uhud, Abu Bakr, or all that. So all you hear, I mean, in my example, again, I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and there are at least eight uh, eight subjects that all Islamic. We have the
Wow.
Quran, we have the interpretation of Quran, we have the Hadith, which is the Prophet, sayings and traditions. we have the tafsir, that's the interpretation. We have fiqh, jurisprudence, and then you have Sirah, which is the Prophet biography, and then you have the Prophet Companions, a book that I will never forget. It's called Suwar min Hayat al-Sahaba, meaning a glimpse of the life of the companions of the Prophet. And each and one of them is being celebrated as a mujahid, as a fighter. So consuming all that, and also, at the same time being told that you have eternal enemies, that people of specific faith that you cannot reconcile with. In fact, even if they were your parent, Muslim are taught to hate them, even if your parent is a kafir, you should not associate with them, you should not eat with them, you should not, you can maybe be a little nice to them because they're your parent, but being told that you have eternal enemies, the Jews and the Christian, and Islam should come back and reoccupy the world, and God would shed his light on the entire ummah, and the religion of Islam would spread all over the world. This is the environment that I grew up in. What would you expect? What would you expect? I mean, the natural outcome from this education is somebody who's radical. And this is who I was growing up, because this is what I knew and this is what I thought to be the right thing, the correct religion. And this is what we have been told. To the degree that when I moved to Chad, because in Chad, they follow the Maliki madhab, and to conclude the prayers, they would only say assalamu alaikum to one side. They don't do both sides, right? To the right side. But the Salafi, the Hanbali people of Saudi Arabia, they say the assalamu alaikum both sides. And I thought that was not Islam. I thought they are not practicing the right Islam. The kind of education I grew up in made me feel, or made me deem, some of my fellow Muslims, some Muslims believing Muslims, as kafirs. So this is what you would get. And I don't know why people in the West are so tolerant of this. And I sadly would say it would really backfire in a very bad way. And now everything that we see I think, is the outcome of that. Because when you go to, when I listen to a lot of Friday's sermons every day almost, right? After October 7, I did not see one condemnation. In fact, I saw blessing. People said, this is the right thing. The Hamas people did the right thing. This is according to the teaching of Islam, and it's absolutely right. So, killing of innocent people was not condemned by these religious figure. Imagine, these are religious figure. And to me, it is very shocking to have somebody called a religious figure, yet an extremist. A religious figure, in my mind, is somebody who is wise, who is sane, who is peaceful, who is loving, who is compassionate, who is understanding, not somebody who incites violence. So you go from the Islamic scholar, what do you call it? The International Union for Muslim Scholars, which is a Muslim Brotherhood organization, consists of hundreds of imam and scholars, right? Based in Qatar, funded by Qatar. They blessed the Jordanian attack, the attack that was carried out by the Jordanian national at the border crossing between Jordan and Israel. They said he did the right thing. Imagine, that's an Islamic organization consisting of men, most of them in their 70s and 60s, old men, blessing this man who carried out an almost suicide attack. It's crazy. It is crazy. And now we have all this teaching happening here. It is happening. It is within these organizations. And it will, at some point, I hope it would not happen, but it would really backfire because the least we can do again is to sideline people with these views, not allow them in our mosque, not employ them. I want my kids when they go to the mosque, this is where they become wiser, not become extreme. This is when they understand that, God or whoever created these people, we can get along. Somebody who can teach them these values, not somebody who says, well, these are your eternal enemies. Now, if you live
Kill them.
here, maybe kill them, but they wouldn't say that. But at some point they would say. So again, also the whole thing about Islam is it's really like a supermarket. You can get anything from it, anything, and it changes. This is why I believe a lot of Muslims are confused because there is nothing solid there. I can bring you something and I can give you the complete
opposite.
opposite of it at the same time. And this is what I've been seeing, and this is what I'm now thinking, or I'm going to start hopefully soon to just put these together in videos so people can see. Just bringing the absurdity, the absurd statement, the contradiction, and just put them out for people to see. And the lies. For example, this imam a few weeks ago delivered a sermon, and he said the Israeli dug beneath the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and they could not find a single archaeology proving their existence there at any point. That's a big lie. And nobody would challenge him. But this is a complete lie. There are proof that, Jews have existed in that area. But he could get away with it because nobody would say anything. And I would end with this for another question. This is something I heard yesterday and today. So this imam in Dar al-Hijra is a mosque not far away from where I am right now. And he started his sermon by saying why the media is focusing on the 6 Israeli hostages that were killed by Hamas and ignoring the 40,000 people who were killed by Israel. Okay, on the onset, you would believe or think that he's sincere in his question. Maybe he wants real answer to this, but he's not. He's not, because clearly there are 2 different things here. Killing a hostage, somebody who was you captured as a hostage, killing them in cold-blooded is different than somebody who's killed in a, airstrike
War
or
zone.
something, war zone. Or so intention is the one big thing that he could not see. Imagine this is an imam lecturing people, and he could not see the difference between these 2. And then he also asked about why Muslims' life don't matter, or people don't value Muslim lives as much as they value other people's life. And I responded to him by a post on Twitter. Maybe you can see it. I said, you can ask this question to somebody like Khalid Mishal, who's Hamas leader, who said, we don't care how many would die from the Palestinian as long as, we're seeking our liberation. He said, yeah, Vietnamese people, 100 millions of them killed in Algeria.
Yeah.
Millions of them got killed. It's okay. In fact, Tariq al-Suwaidan, who is a Muslim Brotherhood figure and leader, said, it doesn't matter. The Jews are 6 million, we're 2 billion. The Jews invest millions of dollars on one individual. And he said, it doesn't matter. He said, it's insignificant when it, and I have the clip. He said, it's insignificant that 40,000 people would die. But he said, if we kill 1 or 2 of them, they get hurt more than we get hurt because we are, we overnumber them. They're more. And again, this imam would not dare bringing this kind of example to his audience, saying, okay, maybe if they valued Muslims' life, other people would value Muslims' life better. But he would not say that. In fact, he would just gonna repeat that Muslims are being killed because The Jews and the Christian and the West love killing Muslim people. And that's insane. People who cannot really use logic to come to very reasonable conclusion that all these people would be still alive if Hamas did not carry out October 7 attacks. And
Hmm.
there was ceasefire until October 7. They did not like that. So it's sad to see people dying, and I've been telling people that it is sad to see people dying. The wise thing to do is not to cause the death of people, not to be stupid, not to
Hmm.
be religiously or ideologically driven to do something thinking that you're pleasing your God and causing the death and destruction of the entire of your nation. A real leader would really pause here for a second and say, let's preserve all these lives. There was no occupation in Gaza. There was none, not a single Jewish Israeli soldier in Gaza. They could have used all these 16 years or billions of dollars to make Gaza a heaven, a Singapore, to make Gaza a
Hmm.
beautiful place, to tell people that we can make something out of nothing. We can do something with not building useless rockets and tunnels underneath. Make some sewage system, for God's sake, for the people of Gaza.
Hmm.
Make something that the world would appreciate, that despite the hardship, despite the blockade, despite everything, you love life. Give people that example. Then
Yeah.
see if the world is not going to stand next to you or not. But presenting people with dead bodies saying, God, you can kill us as much as you like until you're pleased, this is disgusting. When you portray that as something of heroic or something that present a deep belief in what you believe in. And they're presenting these examples as something positive. Nobody likes to see his people die. Every human being want to live and see his kids and grandkids grow and go to school, go to colleges, and get married and have families and have careers. But presenting yourself as somebody who loves death more than people love life, it's it's crazy. It's insane. And
Yeah.
now, the last thing I would say, everything you see in the Arab world, all the anti-Semitism, all the hate, sadly, is being now the champion, the one who's funding all this movement and this narrative of the eternal war against the Jews, and the Jews are evil, and there is, everybody. Imagine I say peace and I get labeled as traitor. Imagine I
Hmm.
say let's be let's be peaceful, let's coexist, and so Al Jazeera is responsible for a lot of this, for keeping Muslim hostage to these beliefs that really insane. Nobody and the lack of as I said, critical thinking, and
Yeah.
they would not allow people to have their independent views on things. It's
Mhm.
like a tribal mentality that everybody should think the same. But even in Gaza, people don't think the same, but you don't see them. You don't see the people who would object to the craziness that Hamas is doing. You do not see them. In Israel, you would see people who would say, yeah, we want peace. They're everywhere. They're allowed to
Yeah.
talk. On Al Jazeera, you would not see that. You
No,
would not see that.
they would
Everybody
be
would.
labeled traitors and they would be putting their lives in danger.
Sorry, I talk too much.
No, Mansour, this is that we are here for you. This is don't apologize. I'm so grateful to you. Every single word that you've said, every single syllable you've uttered is like music to my ears. I love listening to you talk, and everything that you say is so impactful and meaningful. Um, there's a lot of people here that have questions for you. A couple people want me to read them, so I'm just going to read this first one here from Aisha. She asks if you still identify as a Muslim. You don't have to answer that because that's a tricky question for somebody to answer publicly. Um,
Well,
but
I don't.
it's up to you.
Yeah, I don't, but at the same time, I don't allow extremists to define who I am. So when it comes, I have a degree in Sharia, so I can argue either way. But at the same time, if there were to be a good Muslim, it would be somebody like me who love peace, who love, coexistence, who love to see the world in a better place, who doesn't believe in eternal war and all that. So, but yeah, I do not believe, I do not like pray or anything, but traditionally or culturally, maybe.
Yep. Okay, and then she also just wanted to let us know that in Pakistani culture, women are encouraged to be educated to get a good marriage proposal, but only up to undergraduate level, nothing further. Because if you go any further than that, no Pakistani man will ever want to marry you. So I guess there's a cultural difference there where they're allowed to get educated, but only to a certain degree. Um, Okay, so Barry says to you, I went to a local mosque to reach out and try to get a dialogue community together to talk and learn about each other. The individual who met me at the door was respectful and pleasant. He called the imam so I could talk to him. This is a very loud one, or a very long one. I hope there's a question here somewhere. Speaking Arabic over the phone, I could hear a surprise, and they said, "What do we do? A Jew? A Jew is here? Why is he here?" I don't speak Arabic, but it was obvious. I spoke to the imam briefly and he was very pleasant. I gave him my phone number, but he never called me, never tried to get our communities together, or a few at least, and promote dialogue, understanding our lives and experience our beliefs. This was at least a year before October 7th.
Okay, I want to share this because this is very important. I see a lot of Jewish people taking part in the pro-Palestinian event. And, maybe I can understand where they're coming from. Nobody wants to see people die. Maybe they're coming from a good place, I can understand that. Are they misled? I believe so. Are they, they don't get the entire picture? I believe so. But I want to give you one example of how vicious a lot of the pro-Palestinian people are and how disrespectful. Two examples here. There was a rally in Australia, pro-Palestinian rally, a lot of speakers, including a few Jewish girls. At the conclusion of that rally, a Palestinian who was among the organizer of the rally quoted Al-Qassam spokesman, Abu Ubaidah, without saying his name and his title. She said, a wise man once said,
Oh,
the scum of earth. So Abu Ubaidah insulted the entire Jewish people all over the world as the scum of earth. And this woman, having some Jewish allies on the podium, would insult people who came here to show solidarity with them. Like, no shame, nothing. And it just tells you that anti-Semitism goes really deep down, regardless if you're nice to them or not. It's against, that you can hear the argument again. Islam has everything. It's like a cocktail, right? So one imam can tell you, yeah, we don't have problem with the Jews, it's just the Zionists. And you go to the mosque, he says, you cannot have friends with Jews, and they're the eternal enemies, and the most hateful of the Muslim of all. And I have maybe hundreds of videos like that.
yeah,
And the
it's the
other example,
inside
the,
voice and the outside voice are two very different things.
right. And the other example is this, I really forgot his name. It's a Jewish scholar. He's Jewish, but he's pro-Palestinian. He's a scholar. Frankenstein something, his name. Maybe you know him. He goes to all these encampment. He's very outspoken. Anyway, he went to one of the encampments, and he told them, he's very respectful figure, right? And he told them, he said, the, where did you go? He said, the slogan that you say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is problematic. I would really, be careful not to use it, or I would adjust it that everybody would be free, something like that. So he gave a long speech. The the very minute he finished his speech, they shouted, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be. No respect to even a Jewish person who is highly respected, again, pro-Palestinian, telling them how the best way for them to pursue their activism is not to do this. Yet,
Yeah,
they chanted that chant.
this is good for those anti-Zionist Jewish people to hear this. Tochi, a friend of the podcast. Tochi grew up in Saudi Arabia. He's got a question for you, Mansour.
Hey Mansour, what's up, bro? And hey Yasmine. I saw you on Twitter. I don't know if you remember Hip Hop Tochi. I was like, I'm looking forward to seeing you. So yeah, what you were saying, obviously growing up in Saudi, like I lived all over Saudi, so Taif, Jeddah, Tabuk. So the stuff you're saying really it's very true. I mean, it's stuff that I would say I witnessed. And I went to the private schools, and I remember there were a few Saudi kids that were there, but they were there because they were very wealthy, including one of the Bin Laden's nieces who I knew. But anyway, that's beside the point. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit differently, actually, about jihadism in Africa because I saw that you studied in Sudan. And obviously, there's the war going on in Sudan right now. And I know this is a very long topic and could kind of go off the rails, but I was wondering what you thought about how radicalization works in like somewhere like Sudan, I guess compare, and also just in general, we tend to say that, Hamas is equal to Al-Shabaab, which is equal to Boko Haram. And I kind of wanted to get your thoughts around all that. Are they really all the same in terms of what they want, or does radicalization work a little bit differently when you're dealing in somewhere like Sudan where the population is black, essentially? How did they get them on board? Anyway, that's, I'm sorry, I didn't formulate my question as well as I would have liked, but I am very curious to know about sort of your experiences sort of around this topic while in Sudan, or just, thoughts on Sudan in general.
Okay. Well, during my college years, the war with Christians or South Sudanese people was still going on. And as I said, the university I went to was a Muslim Brotherhood hub, and I have classmates who are called Mujahideen, and it was declared as a holy war, as a jihad against unbelievers. Even though these are Sudanese people, they share the same country, same citizenship, yet because they differ from them in terms of religion, they declare holy war against them. And, you know, yeah, these students as fuel to this holy war, as they call it, right? And I saw that happening in front of my own eyes. And this is it's different. So the jihadi groups are different than the Muslim Brotherhood, but it's all within the package of Islam. You can get so many um, um, so many kinds or so many types, if you will. So in Sudan, that was used, and the government in Sudan, and this is also taps into how dangerous the Muslim Brotherhood are, and how they also infiltrated the West and all that. So in Sudan, they created this university. It was sponsored by some of the Gulf states, and it was meant to bring students. In my school, there were students even from the US, so all across the world, Indonesia, Malaysia, almost every single country in Africa, except the Arab African countries in Africa, like Egypt, but almost Muslim, every single Muslim country was represented in my school, and everything that was taught there is from the Muslim Brotherhood point of view, as their global ideology that they wanted to promote across Africa and across the world. And this is what had happened. And now, I'm pretty sure some of these students are part of Al-Shabaab or some other organizations as well. So again, you can have Salafi radical group who wants to establish the caliphate like ISIS, or you can have Muslim Brotherhood people who wants to infiltrate communities and take over and then declare the caliphate. So the end goal is still the same for all these organizations. They differ on the method, how to get there. And the danger, one is imminent danger and one is subtle, but we really have to confront that. And I believe the sooner we start, the better, because there is a lot at stake here, especially in the West.
Can I just follow up very briefly on that? Because I think it's fascinating. You've lived in three different countries that practice some form of Sharia law, I'm assuming, or like Muslim countries, right? Obviously, you lived in Saudi Arabia, so you've also lived in Chad and you've lived in Sudan. And I guess what I'm trying to understand is, did you find the same sort of extremist rhetoric being, I guess, promoted in all three of those countries? Or was there like were there variations? I'm just curious about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, Saudi Arabia, and now is maybe they're relaxing things a little bit, but Saudi Arabia back then was the main sponsor of Salafism across the world. In Chad, they exported Salafism to Chad to the point, maybe 30 to 40 years ago, you wouldn't see a fully covered woman in in the hottest country on earth. But now you would see that. And that's because of the petrodollar money of all these students that Saudi Arabia accept them. And ironically, they wouldn't accept anybody to do engineering or become a pilot or become a doctor. They only admit them to Sharia and Islamic studies education. After they are done, they ship them back home, pay them money, and spread Salafism. And now there is a growing communities of Salafis in Chad, unfortunately. And also, I have among some of the people that I went to school with in Sudan came back to Chad with the same Muslim Brotherhood ideology, and they believe that this is the right thing to do, even though Gaza is much better than Jamena like 100 times, because in Gaza there was 38 hospitals. In Jamena, maybe you have two or three of them. Yet the people in Chad, the Islamists, believe that the Gazan are suffering, and they had a very difficult life. And Chad does not even have electricity. People don't have electricity, and they don't have sewage system in Chad. There's, the building, the high buildings, you can count them really in Chad. They're like countable. Unlike in Gaza, when you see the picture, you see a lot of high rise and all that. Okay, in Chad, yeah, there's no Sharia law in Chad, thankfully, and it's a country that is recognized, or its constitution says it's a secular country, so that's good. But Muslims have a kind of Muslim council that they would go to for ahwal al-shakhsiyya, for like getting married, divorce, and issues of inheritance and all that. In Sudan, the Islamist movement started some sort of Sharia laws. They would flog people. I saw that, so if somebody is caught drinking or somebody is caught having even consensual sexual relationship, they would be flogged or, punished according to Sharia laws. And it was not as vivid as they wanted it to be because uh, people people are against these punishment in general, and Sudan at some point tried to reconnect with the world and get recognized, so they relax these laws, but they remain corrupt, even though they say they rule in the name of Islam, but they are the most corrupt people. Now you can see, as this war broke out, they have real estate, they have properties in Turkey and Malaysia and everywhere, and they left the regular, ordinary Sudanese people to struggle, while
Same.
almost every single person of them who had been taking part in the government, they ran away and they live peacefully and decent life now.
Same old story. Are you good, Tochi?
I am. Thank you so much. That was great.
All right. Awesome. Okay, Evan, you're next.
Okay, yeah. So this is sort of. Oh, oops, am I muted? Am I
No,
muted?
you're good. No,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah. So this is sort of. There's a little bit of a two-part. So I'm going to try to make it quick to get through this. But basically, the first part is, to what extent do you think it is possible for like Muslim communities to sort of like and to make progressive interpretations of the Quran mainstream in the same way that Christians did during the Enlightenment when human rights became a prevalent and the hand was sort of like force. For example, was the Quran like a progressive interpretation of some verses like 4.19 or like 65.4, but doing it in a post-Enlightenment interpretation would mean like you wouldn't like embrace the stories of Sophia or Aisha as being like literal or actual stories for all time. So to what extent do you think that there could be a post-Enlightenment for Muslims where like Quran is interpreted in a way that's far away from literal and much more progressive? To what extent do you think that could be done in Muslim communities? To so you could fight radicalism.
Okay, yeah, this is a very good question, and I really don't think that is necessary. I think Muslim community should focus on just teaching or preaching or embracing positive aspect of Islam. Like the report that I wrote after the October 7 attack, for example, after hearing a lot of Muslims imam endorsing Hamas, blessing its attack, saying it's exactly, goes according to the Quran. I believe that was not the full picture. In Islam, there are so many things. As I said, it's a like a supermarket. You can get whatever you want. And when the scary part about this is when all these people, none of them decided to choose the other idea. Meaning, in Islam, I can find you verses that tells you not to do something that would backfire at you and, bring all this destruction and death. Meaning, if you're weak, you cannot start a war that would inflict harm and pain on Muslims. It also tells you not to take women or children as hostage or elder people as hostage. None of these Muslim imam mentioned that, which tells you that there is an ideological spin behind that. They are not truly honest in presenting the Islamic interpretation. So I'm not asking, Muslim to sit down and bring some new interpretation. I'm asking for Muslim communities to hire the sane person, the wise person, the people who can bring people together to spread love and coexistence, not hate and discrimination. That's what we should focus on. I mean, all these jihad verses would go away if people don't pay attention to them. If only the extremists, the minority, or you can get hired anywhere, they can preach them wherever they want. And now they have the internet. But institution-wise, this should be the norm. This should be the mainstream of Islam. Not mainstream of Islam should be the stream that is for peace and love, especially in the West, because people coexist here. You can have your neighbor as a Jews, as Christian, they go to mosque, you go to your mosque, they go to their synagogue. Everybody's happy. So this is why I also call for Muslims in the West who are open-minded to take the lead here, because we have a different example in front of us. We can deliver something according to our realities here. We can tell the Muslim world to relax and chill and coexist with Sunnis and Shia, because we are coexisting here. We can tell the Palestinian and the Arab to coexist with the Jews because it's doable. As Yuval Harari said, there is enough land for everybody. It's just, the ideology that is pro-hate, the support hate, is the one preventing that. Otherwise, there's enough land for everybody to live and be free and, coexist. In fact, the Palestinians could learn a lot from the Israelis to get their country where Tel Aviv is now. I've been there. I visited Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv is beautiful. You walk around, you feel like you're in a very beautiful country, and it is a beautiful country, beautiful people, very respectful. You wouldn't see that in some other part of the Arab world. They could learn a lot from the Israelis. So what I want to see is radicalism become something abnormal, become something extreme. Usually extreme is on the side. Mainstream Islam should be the one. I want, when my kids go to the mosque, I want the imam to be saying love, peace, coexistence. It's doable. We can make it happen. Not hate the Jews, hate the Christian. Well, you live in a Christian country or some, it just does not make sense.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I want to say that there is cherry picking going on. So like Mansour said, there are opposite ideas. So for someone like me who has left the religion, there's an ayah that says I should be killed, and there's an ayah that says there's no compulsion in religion. So they have a choice to choose the more humanist, freedom of belief ayah, or they have the choice to choose the violent ayah. And they choose the violent one. And that's the one that is in the laws of a dozen Muslim majority countries. And that's the one that is mainstream. So that's the problem. The problem isn't that, the problem is that mainstream Muslims now consistently, again and again, are choosing the more violent verses. And I think that has a lot to do, back again to what you were saying, Mansour. Most people aren't reading even the Quran. Forget the ahadith, forget the tafsir, forget anything else. They're not reading anything, but they're listening to their imam. So that's why it's really significant that if there were imams that were choosing to focus on different verses and ignoring the other ones, then yeah, it would be the Muslim world would be a completely different place. But that the exact opposite is what's happening, whether in the Muslim world or in the West.
Yeah,
That's
and
what's
one
happening.
way to do this in Muslim institution in the US is to really encourage religious figure with different mindset, and especially the peaceful ones. If there were elections in this institution, now these imam are hired by organization, and most of these organizations are controlled by Muslim Brotherhood. They get their money from
That's where the money
Qatar,
is.
they get their money
Yeah.
from Turkey, they get their money from all these radical figures, and they want to just radicalize kids in the West. Now, if there is election, people can choose their imam. People can choose, and it's going to be maybe a long process, but it would lead to the right way when people have the right. Now, I feel like these people, because a lot of the kids we have, a lot of the people, most goers are smart people. Yet, they feel sometimes, I can really feel that they feel insulted when somebody who is lying is up there, who is somebody who is, driven by an ideology preached to them, who is somebody who is not really asking people to think, instead preaching to them, trying to feed them his own insecurities, his own hate, and his own propaganda that he wanted to propagate on people. There is no open discussion. There is no open discussion. Who hates peace? Who hates peace? But now if you say I want peace, you're considered dangerous, you're considered bad. And this is the crazy part about this. This is in fact, most Muslims should say, yes, we want peace. Let's push for peace. If you want to go do jihad, you go do it on your own. And, slowly by slowly, you can see that paradigm shift. You can see a shift in people's perspective when the truth is told. People don't care about the truth anymore now. A lot of people, they don't even believe that Hamas did something wrong in October 7th. They don't believe that, women were abused in October 7th. They don't believe all this. They say, well, look at them. When Hamas released them, they're happy, they're in good shape. And they're just live in their own bubbles. They don't care about the truth. If you just think a little bit, you will learn about the truth. These people, the leaders of Hamas, they really don't care about the people. This is from their own statements. And the other day, maybe you saw this journalist in the West Bank, it's out there. She was in a podcast. She did a report interviewing all this resistant fighter or whatever in the West Bank. They have so many groups. And she said it. This tunnel was dug under the mosque. Intentionally. They said, she said it. She's a Palestinian and pro all these organizations. She said she went through the tunnel that goes underneath a mosque. Yet these imams, when they go there, they would not mention that. Why in the world would anybody dig a tunnel under a mosque? And then when Israel bombed the mosque, they were like, yeah, they hate our mosque. That's why
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's why they chose to put them under hospitals and schools and mosques, because they know that Israel is not gonna want to bomb those areas because they're gonna get all of this international negativity. That's the plan. Okay, Molyneux, Chanel, right?
Are you talking to me, Yasmine?
Am I talking to you? Yes, yes.
So I've read, like, I'm just a Gentile Caribbean American girl from DC, so I'm just like new to all of this. I've read your book. It's very amazing. I'm so sorry what has happened to you, and I hope you sue the hell out of the Canadian government. Mansour, you're in DC, so when I consider you, I'm considering you Black. Like, we're all Black people, regardless of where we are in the diaspora, whether Africa, Caribbean, we're all Black people. My issue is, after all this time of the 10 months, me and my friends were just talking about it, and we was like, what is going on with these Arabs? I'm not meaning to be racist. What is going on with you? Because we as Black people within the United States, I don't think that people understand and realize, like, Black Americans, we give so much to this movement. Like, we're literally losing our job, losing our schooling, everything to this movement. Like, originally, I was really pro-Palestine because I didn't know anything, just that Israel I thought was white, and the Palestinians were brown, so I automatically was societal with them. And I realized one day I was getting so extreme. And then I was like, I thought, well, I was going to go into Gaza if something happened, because they really get you like radically and extreme. But I was like, wait a second, your fat ass ain't going nowhere. You need to remember these people were attacked. So I started to look into what was going on. And I apologize to the Jewish community because I feel like I didn't know anything. My main issue with all this 10 months is that, and I will go into accents up here Caribbean, these people have more heat for Black Americans, have more heat for Kamala, this Black lady, than they have for their own leaders. I'm trying to ask them, after 10 months and all this destruction and everything that has gone on, even in the media, like, Black people involved don't want to ask this question because they say, well, I'm Islamophobic. At this point, after all the racism directed to me, I don't give a damn. I will question you. After all this goddamn months, was it worth it? After all this month, is it worth it? I'm telling Black people all the time, I said, you really don't know how this will operate. I have no disrespect to foreigners. Y'all come here. My family came from the Caribbean. They made a life for themselves. I have no disrespect to you. You came here, you make a life for yourself because, like I said, you're Black. We all Black. We all trying to make a life for ourselves. There's no accountability after all this 10 months. And I am being so goddamn angry with these people. There's no accountability for how they have spent money because they have UNRWA money. There's no accountability for the Let Gaza Live protest. I never even heard of that until I listened to this lady, Yasmine. There's no accountability. And when I tell it to them, they say, well, you're Islamophobic. You're a sellout. You're a slave. That's the worst thing that you can ever call me is a slave because number one, I'm not ashamed of my ancestors. They came from Africa, the Caribbean, like Jamaica's next door to Haiti. Like we just did like ultimate like slave revolt. So I'm not ashamed of my ancestors at all. But when you call me a slave, that is when I'm going to have to get disrespectful to you and remind you that your ancestors enslaved our people for like 1,400 years. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to have to get really disrespectful to you. And then they kind of shut up. Because I told them, I see why these Jews are very angry with you. Because I said, these are the one thing that really convinced me that they belong there is that I didn't know they were like Middle Eastern Jews. And so I said, wait a second, why are you telling these people that they don't belong here? And for like Black people, why are we to tell people that they don't belong here? Like, I'm not native to that area. They are. How are we doing this? And it just seems like I feel like we're getting played. We're getting like as Black community, we're getting played. We're getting used. At the same time, we're wanting everybody to be concerned about racism, but we don't concern about anti-Semitism. And I tell people like, we are so comfortable with hatred to Jews, but this bullshit is affecting us. When I look at what's going on in Nigeria with Boko Haram, I am so goddamn angry. Like I tell people, like, I don't think people understand like the depth of this. Like when I tell people Iran, they say, what did Iran do? I said, wait a second. Like that is literally killing us because a couple of weeks ago in Nigeria, a recent Iranian second Nigeria, like I think seriously injured 3 and killed 2. Like this is affecting us. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be disrespectful, but you're not gonna like, I'm at a point where I have to confront them because you're not gonna be using us to create some little great value caliphate. That's what you ain't going to do. You ain't going to do that because if you do that, then I will get disrespectful. I will get kind of racist with you. It's not because I want to disrespect you. It's just I have to set you straight. Because y'all have gone like really out of order. You have no brought ups. You have no order. And so I'm going to have to bring you to order. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to be disrespectful, but it's just at this point, it's been 11 goddamn months. You don't take any accountability, then you want to come to us and slay. No, I can't deal with that, Mansour. And so, like I said, I consider you Black, you my brother, but like, I don't know how to get like to Black people, like to really wake up because I feel like we're taken advantage of and we're going into certain areas and we're going to end up with like a terror charge on our ass and we're going like, what the hell's going on? But it's like, I already knew what's going on. I already knew the racism that the Arab community was having with these Black profiles and makers, and they don't get it. But I knew because they was expressing it to me first. So I'm like not shocked. My friends like, what's going on? I'm not shocked. But Mansour, I don't know how to reach other Black people and like tell them how to wake up. Don't know.
Well, I don't know either. Sorry. It is really very sad though. And maybe Toshi can talk about this as well, about the situation of Black people in the Arab world. I'm not saying all the Arabs are racist against Black, but there are a lot of things to be improved in the Arab world about their treatment of Black. Gaza, for example,
what's a common word that Arabs use for Black people?
abd, means slave.
Which translated means slave. That's
Slave.
what they call Black people.
But even in Gaza, there is a Black community.
An area.
Yeah, huge area. You don't see them anywhere. You don't see them in TV.
And what's the area called?
I don't know.
It's called an area
Tel
for
Aviv?
Abid.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's called the slave area.
I could imagine that, and I could talk forever about the racism that I felt in Arab countries. But again, it's there are two different things here when it comes to Black. I understand the passion. I understand the passion for justice, the passion against the killing of children and women and all that. This is Everybody here, I think, agree with that. There's no question about that. The problem here is that these Arabs and Islamists have an agenda that is completely different than ours, let me say, as Black in America, right? Or for the African American people. Because for the African American people, this is their country, this is their homeland. For them, they want to use Black people against their own against their own best interest in America. Their end goal, they say, they want to destroy America as a superpower. They don't want that anymore. I can send you the podcast. One of their most recognized poet went to school in Boston. He taught at Georgetown here. Yet he wants this country to collapse completely. Even though he got scholarships from here, he taught here, he got his money from here. Now he believes that the United States should no longer exist as a superpower in the world. And this goes exactly against the best interest of us as Americans, of Black people, because this is their homeland. Yet they have no problem using every single person, even the people that they disrespect, they hate the most, Black and Jews. They have no problem using them to achieving this goal that goes against, the most strongest supporter of Jewish people around the world, which is the US, and against our own best interests as Black people in this country.
Do they hate us? No, I want to be very serious.
I mean, this is going to be very simplistic. I'm not going to go there, but yeah, there are a lot of, you wouldn't see them. Look, even in the mosque now, they don't talk about Sudan. They believe the whole world should focus on Gaza. My sister is displaced now in Sudan. She almost died. Nobody gives a damn about Sudan. Nobody gives a damn that these people are killing each other. Why? Because they're Black people. You don't see the focus. You don't see the attention. They only want to focus about hate. They hate white people. They hate the Western culture. They hate everything because they blame it for their situation instead of taking ownership and fixing them, taking accountability and working on whatever you have to improve your situation. They enjoy blaming others and on their misery, and this should be unacceptable. And voices like ours should be out there. I know we don't get time or minutes on mainstream, but every one of us can really share these views to the people that are around you, to challenge the narrative. Just present facts to them, like the mere facts to them. And this is what I thought now I'm gonna start doing, because the amount of false, fake information, lies, deception, inaccuracies, and propaganda, and also misinformation is huge. We have a lot of cleanup to do to just present fact as fact, make things like peace sound reasonable. It should be. It shouldn't be really hard to make it happen. But I have a friend. She's no longer my friend now, Jordanian Palestinian. I've known her for about 15 years. So since October 7th, she had been calling me almost every week to tell me how the US is controlled by Jews and how Israel is controlling this country, and, sending me stuff to watch and all that. So a friend of mine, I didn't want to really, I didn't want to bother her, or, I was listening. I just gave her an ear to say whatever she wanted. At some point, it was too much lies, too much misinformation, too much deception, too much everything, anti-Semitism. And I said, look, why did Hamas started this war? I asked a simple question. I said, I am sad that all these people are being killed, but they would not have been killed had Hamas did not start the war. And she said, well, you say this because you're not Palestinian. I said, no, I say this because I'm a human being, and I don't think any human being want to die. It's a, what do you call it? Natural instinct that we want to live and survive and see our loved one alive. You see? And then she said, oh, do you want to tell me that Hamas is using Palestinians as human shield? I said, of course they are.
It's
And
new information.
she hung up on me, and we haven't talked since then, I swear. People don't believe the truth. They don't believe it. They just want to spread lies. And this is what Al Jazeera has been doing. You know, Al Jazeera has been saying that the 6 people, the 6 hostages that Hamas killed, they want to tell people that the IDF killed them.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable. You would hear things that just, if somebody would sit down and just think independently for 2 minutes, they will figure it out. But you are not allowed to do so, because it's a tribal mentality that they just wanted everybody to do it. Now they wanted the Black Lives Matter people to be on board, even though they are not pro-Black at all. You would not see a single Black person on TV, on a Palestinian TV. None, zero. They're invisible. Like in India, there is the untouchable. In Palestine or West Bank or wherever, they're invisible. They're not even recognized as human beings.
See, this is one of the very many shameful parts of Arab societies that will never be, they can't even acknowledge it. If you can't acknowledge it, if you can't address it, if you can't even have the ability to do any kind of self-criticism, then they will never evolve. And the way that they treat Black people in the Arab and Muslim world is another example of that. There's not even a consciousness. I'm going to tell you guys a crazy story that happened to me in Qatar. My husband was having an interaction with this Qatari man, and the guy says to him, I'm going to send my driver to pick up the money, because he was selling some computer thing to him or whatever. I'm going to send my driver to pick up the money. He's Black, but it's okay. You can trust him. And my husband was like, what the fuck did this guy just say to me? I was like, that's just the way they are. They don't even know how racist they are because it's so normalized. They're not even at the point where they even recognize there's a problem, let alone at the part where they're ready to solve it. Okay, so there are a lot of people that have their hands up. There's a lot of questions. This is an opportunity for me to tell you all that there is a Yasmine Mohammed community starting, because every time we have a podcast, we've been going for about 2 hours now, and we've gone for 3 hours before and stuff. And so what we have now is a community, a podcast community, where on my website you can continue to interact with each other and with the guest that we have on, and continue to ask your questions after the show, because there's just too much to talk about. And I think it's really important for us to have this community where we can all interact with each other, get to know each other, network with each other, support each other. So having said that, I'm going to ask Ari, you get the last word, and then everybody else, my apologies, but we'll see you in the Yasmine Mohammed community.
Well, thank you very much, Yasmine. Again, totally appreciate your work. So inspiring. Am I coming through clearly enough?
Yep, perfect.
Okay, great. And thank you, Mansour. I really appreciate your work. I saw you work with memory. Is that still the case?
Yes.
Yes, and I am very impressed with what memory has done. And I was in Middle Eastern Studies program myself at Berkeley, and even then, in the 90s, it was very difficult to see the truth come out. and to see the translations come out as they are. And one of the questions I had was regarding the disinformation campaigns, and particularly what Qatar is doing, um, primarily through Al Jazeera, but I'm not sure how else they're acting. And and I wanted to relate that to one thing I saw a few years ago, which was that there's a character called Naz. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's an influencer. He's kind of a funny guy, an Israeli Arab, and he said that the Al Jazeera Arabic was putting out complete lies about him, saying he's a Zionist tool and all this stuff, and it wasn't in the Al Jazeera English. And I was wondering if you've seen uh, that as well, because the Al Jazeera English is bad enough in terms of its bias. But the two questions I have is really about Al Jazeera
Okay.
and how it relates to and how it compares to Al Arabiya, because I know they're competitors, and I know in the Saudi world they have. I'm not sure what the relationship is there, if it's just a regional rivalry that's causing this. But it seems like Al Arabiya is trying to be more tame and than Al Jazeera. And the other thing I'm concerned with, particularly with what memory is doing, is Wikipedia. I'm concerned about if that is considered to be a source of truth, is are people monitoring particularly the Arabic Wikipedia, and seeing if people are gaming that?
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for the questions. Al Jazeera is the media wing for the Muslim Brotherhood, period. Qatar is the sponsor of the Muslim Brotherhood organization, period. So I'm glad Israel finally decided to kick Al Jazeera out, because all the lies, the coverage, um, they I know people who work at Al Jazeera. They say the war would have not extended to this length had Al Jazeera not been there. Meaning Al Jazeera contributed heavily into extending this war by propagating lies and misinformation around the clock on its platform. Not only that, I can go on and on. The International Union for Muslim Scholars is a Muslim Brotherhood organization that is based and funded by Qatar. And also in Al Jazeera Arabic, you would see article like, would suicide bombing surge now after, a few Hamas leaders called for that, and basically encouraging people to carry out suicide bombing attacks. And you would see that on Al Jazeera. It's ridiculous the amount of hate and anti-Semitism and intolerance that is being propagated by one of our biggest allies in the Middle East. So I think they're not heading to the right direction, and I think they will struggle at some point. As for Al Arabiya, Al Arabiya is from Saudi Arabia, and the Islamists call it Al Ibriya, meaning the Hebrew, or yeah, the Hebrew one, as in accusing Al Arabiya to be pro-Israel. And I mean, the rivalry is not that much, really. I believe a lot of people watch Al Jazeera every day. Sometimes I go to see some friends that I know, and Al Jazeera would be on all the time. My mom watches Al Jazeera every day. So, and this is really very important, because again, you hear one side, you hear one propaganda all the time. Trust me, it's gonna sink in, and without knowing, you would repeat all these lies. Every person who watches Al Jazeera without critically thinking about the content would be anti-Semite, period. 100% about that. I was in Dallas a few, time ago, and a story about the Holocaust come in, and this friend of mine said, "Well, yeah, they say, they lie about how many people they lost in the Holocaust. They don't believe it, as if it didn't happen." So I don't see a lot of rivalry there between Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya. Al Arabiya is, I would say, is the main source of hate and misinformation that is accepted. Imagine that's the mainstream. Imagine, and it's all hateful, and
You mean Al
and
Jazeera?
Al Jazeera, yeah, sorry,
Mhm.
Al Jazeera, yeah, and that's the mainstream. It's crazy. It's so radical, like radical views, and it employs a lot of Palestinians, and I'm sure they have their own spin on the things, but of course it comes approved by the Qatari authority, and I think they're bringing a lot of troubles to their country in the future, because they are really holding the entire region back because of the narrative that they are propagating. It's if any sane person watches Al Jazeera for a few minutes, you would realize that, because you would not hear anything positive. And while they bring the different voices inside Israel, as to show that maybe Bibi is not that popular or anything, they would never bring any voice that opposes Hamas, or
Right.
say things that at least logical and would make people think even a little bit. They would not do that. They're constantly feeding Arab speakers and Arab people in the Middle East all the lies, all the hate, all the misinformation, all everything. And because it's in a huge volume, a lot of nobody is really going there and trying to correct or point it out, because it's just, this is the main thing. The whole thing has become a lie, a gigantic lie machine. As for the Wikipedia, yeah, I don't. My boss didn't mention that, and I think also there are a lot of lies there on Wikipedia. I don't know. It's another project that people should really dedicate some time to, or some organizations at least. But no, memory, I haven't seen anything in regards to Wikipedia.
Thank you,
That's a
Mansour.
big job, because there
Yeah,
are very few free thinkers in the Muslim world who would be willing to do that work. And there's so much Qatari funded propaganda and lies. Like you're up against it's a David and Goliath situation there.
yeah. Yasmine, everybody, they can have my Twitter account and send me whatever question you have, or if you want to
Wonderful.
talk,
Thank you so
we
much.
can talk.
So
Yep.
there was Sarah and Aisha and Barry and others. Please, I will send you Mansour's Twitter. Actually, Mansour, can you tell us your Twitter now for even people listening? Oh, you don't? Okay.
It's Manny Al-Hadj, MANNY ALHADJ.
Okay, perfect. So you can send your questions to Mansour there, and I will as well. I'll send you all a message with his Twitter handle so you can continue the conversation there. Barry doesn't do Twitter. This is why you got to join the Yasmine Mohammed community, because the conversation will continue there. But for now,
Or
we have to conclude this
email,
one.
you can
Okay,
also put my email
I'll
there.
share that as well. So before I let you go, Mansour, I just want to make sure that you said everything that you wanted to say, that if there's any parting words that you have for us, any words of advice. There was quite a few questions about Islam and choosing the good parts of Islam and what can we do about encouraging Muslims to start paying attention to the good parts and things like that. So, whatever it is that you want to end this conversation with, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for really having me. There's one thing I want to end this meeting with. I'm so happy to see all of you and nice questions, everyone. And it's something that I got introduced to recently. It's called the soft bigotry of low
Yeah.
expectations. And when you look at that, I think it will help you understand a lot of the things that is happening around you. We're not saying there is a perfect race or human group or anything. We're saying everybody who's doing something wrong, they should be held accountable, regardless if they're minority, if they're white, if they're black, if they're short, if they're tall. And that would put a lot of things in perspective. People should not get away with things. And that is a form of bigotry in itself. Realizing that would give you a wider, what do you call it, lens to actually see things the way they are. And accountability is very important, as it comes often in this conversation, because without that, people would still, would continue to act as if they're children, and because they know that nobody would hold them accountable.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Mansour. That soft bigotry of low expectations is a big theme in my book. And I love what you said about accountability and that acting like children perpetually and victimhood. Beautifully said. Thank you so much for all of your words of wisdom. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for joining us here. And we'll see you on Twitter, Mansour, to continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
After hearing all that, you might be left wondering, what can I do? How can I help? Well, this is why I created a nonprofit called Free Hearts, Free Minds. We are the only organization dedicated exclusively to helping these free thinkers. We empower them with our programs and supportive community, lifting them up so they can heal, speak out, and begin to make positive changes, not just in their own lives, but within the broader community around them. If this is a cause that resonates with you and you want to make a difference, one way to do that is by donating to Free Hearts, Free Minds. Because not enough people care about this cause, we need people like you to help fuel this change. You can donate via our website, freeheartsfreeminds.com. Thank you. Every dollar you donate makes a difference.